This is Holly, and I'm just welcoming everyone to this first Biomimicry Exchange Network webinar. I say first because I think it'll be the first of many of us discovering this new way of sharing value around the world through the Biomimicry Network. And I want to congratulate Jamie, and in particular as being the one who's continued to help us take the next step forward with this concept and this idea that she came to the November gathering with, and it gathered steam there, and it has continued to do so. So I'm excited that we have a platform to try out this new idea with. And also want to thank the network leader working group who supported Jamie in this as well, and helped with the earlier prototyping and thinking through and helping it gain some momentum. So just to kind of go over, we have, Melina, I don't know if she's in Colombia or Quebec, and Justin from South Africa, and Matthew from South Africa, and Colin from LA, and Jacques from Switzerland, and from San Diego, and Jennifer from the Puget Sound, Washington area, and Carol from the Midwest there, from the Great Lakes area. So we kind of are, if I think I got everybody there, we spanned the globe here pretty well. But thank you all very much, and we'll see how we can learn and put this new idea to work. Jamie?
Okay, thanks so much, Holly. And it's really incredible to have the Global Network as a platform to experiment with new designs for our self-organization. How can we design our own everything? So I've totally appreciated this community and what we're able to explore together. Well, we know that biomimicry can be applied to products or processes or systems. So generally what we're talking about today is applying biomimicry to the financial system or to financial architecture. So the big question is, how would nature design a financial system? And so far, the best answer we have to that question is community credit. So we're going to start with a sort of very condensed overview of community credit as the long-term self-funding strategy for the biomimicry movement in the bio-inspired style of self-organization. That's what this diagram is about. So this will be a visual aid for this part of the webinar. And I imagine it'll take about 10 or 15 minutes until everyone can make sense of this picture, I hope, so that you can basically understand the logic of what we're doing and the strategy that we're pursuing. We could then spend probably another 10 or 15 minutes on a live demonstration of the Biomimicry Exchange Network, which is our first prototype of a mutual credit facility. And then the rest of the webinar would be then open discussion. All right, back to this diagram, starting at the upper left. Whenever we talk about a funding strategy, this is really code language for embedding ourselves in a credit system, because money is credit. All of our conventional sources of funding come from a global credit system. And we don't normally think of ourselves as having a choice of credit systems because we're all basically embedded in one. And we tend to assume that we're going to continue embedding ourselves in the same one. But the truth is that we do have a choice. And it's important, well, it's very interesting, and it's also very important that we recognize this. So generally speaking, there are two credit systems or two types of credit that we can realistically imagine embedding ourselves within as the global biomimicry movement. They are bank credit and community credit. Now, bank credit is the system that we already know and love. It's the one we're already embedded within. And this is now a single homogeneous global system. So virtually all conventional funding, whether you're talking about dollars or euros or yen, comes into existence through this one globally integrated banking system, which has its headquarters here where I am in Basel, and I've got a little picture of that for you. There. So that's the headquarters of the global bank system, which is the one that we're currently embedded in. Now, community credit is very different. This would be a more accurate visual depiction of community credit. This is from Louis Schwarzenberg's short film called The World of Solution, where he was trying to visually depict mycorrhizal fungi starting from under the ground and extending into human systems. And this is a more accurate depiction of community credit. It is not one large system, but it is a diversity of small systems, and it doesn't involve or require any kind of national currency. It could, but because it's completely bottom up, it doesn't at the moment. This is really the undergrowth. So a community credit system is created whenever a group of people or organizations decides to directly issue credit to each other for their own goods and services. And another word for that is mutual credit. We can all do this. It's a birthright. We can, if you've ever issued credit for a family member on their birthday for something that you can provide them later, like for a child, if you issue them credit for get out of your chores week, that kind of thing. We all know how to do this in the context of our own families. And this is the power of credit creation that we're talking about. So from a biomimicry perspective, back to our diagram, community, now we're at the upper right. Community credit is by far the more interesting system because it is consistent with biological design principles, or with the design of mature biological systems, in all the ways that bank credit is not. So community credit is bottom-up, locally attuned and adapted, decentralized. It's really a diversity of models that are interacting in non-equilibrium with each other. It's generally speaking a zero growth model that's premised on qualitative expansion rather than quantitative expansion. You can describe it as a kind of permaculture landscape of systems nested within systems that are iterative and modular. It's basically everything we dream of from a biological design perspective. And the bank credit system doesn't have those attributes. Bank credit is a monoculture, it's top down, it's very homogeneous, it's not adaptable to local contexts, and it's premised on quantitative expansion only, which we know in the biological realm, quantitative expansion is appropriate only for certain phases of development. So youthful phases, pioneering phases. And bank credit has been appropriate for us during a youthful phase of our human species, which has been our empire building phase. But we've now maxed out that strategy as a species. So what we're looking to do is to move into a zero growth model that's premised on qualitative rather than quantitative expansion. And this is what community credit offers us. So our biomimicry ethos would suggest that our aim should be to shift the weight of our economic dependence out of bank credit and into community credit to the extent that we can over time, and to be on the lookout for ways that we can do that as they become available to us. So that's the spirit of what the Biocredits Working Group has been doing on behalf of the Global Network since last October. We've been looking out for and developing those opportunities. Now, until today, the obvious objection to choosing community credit over bank credit is that the market for community credit would be too small. If we limit ourselves to trading only within our local networks, we won't be able to cover all of our needs because the modern economy is so specialized that we're now dependent on a very large market for survival. This wasn't always true. We evolved in small tribes that were economically self-sufficient. But now that the modern economy, now that we are integrated into a global economy, we are very highly specialized. So we do depend on a larger market. And so far, community credit systems haven't been automatically interoperable. They're only interoperable when you have a human being who acts as a broker between them. But that we haven't had the technological systems that are compatible with each of the community currency facilities in order to make them directly interoperable. But that's now changing. So that's very, very exciting news for the biomimicry movement, because there are new internet-based systems that are being developed that will allow intertrading between communities. And that means that even if our local credit facility has a small internal market, we will still be able to access a larger market by intertrading with other communities. And that capacity is what would ultimately make community credit a real contender to bank credit as a global means of exchange if we choose to use it. So the technologies themselves are no longer the obstacle. They're right at our doorstep. Now it's really a matter of choice. It's like the choice of buying organic. You can have the organic options there, but if we don't choose to buy them, it doesn't make a difference. So part of what this webinar is for is to help build awareness, especially within the biomimicry community, that this option exists. And we can be aware of it and start looking for those opportunities to move into it. You can also call this another aspect of the maker movement, and I think it's really interesting to think of it that way. We're familiar with the maker movement because we've been following the development of 3D printing technologies within the biomimicry community. And 3D printing is a disruptive technology in the realm of manufacturing, whereas community credit is disruptive in a very similar way in the realm of financial architecture or the architectures of exchange. So community credit is to financial architecture what 3D printing is to manufacturing, you could say. In both cases, we're talking about breakthrough innovations that are already working, but they're not yet mass market. And they democratize and localize our economic processes and open up new dimensions of biomimetic potential that we didn't previously have in either realm, whether you're talking about production or credit creation. I like to call it the money maker movement, where we're not making money, but we're making money. So moving now to the bottom right, we're almost done with our diagram. The landscape, the general landscape of community credit globally is very diverse and very dynamic. It's always changing because the models are totally customizable to the context of local communities, and there's free entry and exit of new models into and out of the system. However, so it's very dynamic and very diverse, and it's really impossible to fix it into a single pattern. But still, it is possible to recognize at the moment 3 distinct cultures that have already emerged among these communities, these community systems. They are LETS, which stands for Local Exchange Trading Systems, business-to-business barter systems, and time banks. Now, each one of those cultures uses different systems, and they sort of organize in slightly different ways, but they all operate on the same basic principle of mutual credit exchange. The LETS, the local exchange trading systems, are the most community-based, and so we could also say they're the most biologically bottom-up, meaning they're the most directly connected to living organisms or living people. And so this is where the Biocredits Working Group is bringing our community into the picture. So what we have developed is our own LETS, and at the moment it's called the Biomimicry Exchange Network, or BXN. That's what's depicted in the middle, and that's what we're going to be demonstrating today. However, it is good to recognize that you don't have to create a system, you don't have to create a new one in order to become part of the moneymaker movement. It's always easiest to join a system that already exists. So we would really encourage everyone, and generally the biomimicry movement more broadly, to look for the LETS or the business-to-business barter systems or the time banks that already exist in your communities, in your networks, and to join them where it makes sense for you. However, as the biomimicry community, it's also really interesting for us to learn how to do this ourselves so that we can answer questions like, what kind of design elements would we choose? And can we really do this? To what extent can we self-organize? And let's really push the limits here. So our vision is not just that we will be able to trade directly with each other, which is what this allows us to do, and of course that's interesting in itself, but also that we will learn. Because after So our Biomimicry Exchange Network is currently in a pilot phase, which will last about 6 to 12 months. And after that pilot exercise, representatives from each of the major biomimicry networks worldwide who choose to participate will understand what it means to be part of a community credit facility, and they will be empowered to create systems for their own local networks, their own biomimicry networks at home, if they want to. And then those more local groups, more local networks could intertrade with the others around the world. So we would be in a position to create our own sort of bottom-up ecology of credit communities nested within credit communities, just within the biomimicry movement alone, within our existing networks. Now, on the broader global landscape, a proposal has been submitted to the European Commission under its Horizon 2020 program that would develop software extensions that would be compatible with each of those major trading blocks, the LETs, the business-to-business barter systems, and the time banks that currently exist, so that they could directly intertrade with each other. So these would be import-export software extensions that each community would add on to its system, but it would not change or compromise the sovereignty of the community over its own design elements. So it would leave each system intact, but it would allow them to communicate and to directly interoperate. The proposal that's been submitted to the European Commission would allow communities to intertrade using a technology called Ripple. And Ripple is similar to Bitcoin in terms of the technology, but it's different in its application. Now, we're still waiting to hear back from the European Commission on that proposal, but it's not a very expensive one. And basically, the technologies themselves we can expect them to be achieved within the next 2 years. So we can look forward to that. In the meantime, though, we don't have to wait for the technologies to be there to start intertrading with other networks, so long as there's one person in each network. So after our pilot exercise, the members of the Biomimicry Exchange Network, which is the global credit facility, would be in a position to broker intertrading between the regional networks. So we can already start to do that, but we can look forward within the next 2 years to actually having those technologies available. And that was a little sneak peek of what that might look like. Okay, so that's the overview. Holly, I'm just seeing your notes. Okay, so to the participants who we didn't have a chance to welcome, Holly is asking if you could share your names.
Hey, Jamie, it's Catherine Collins. I joined a little late. Thank you for doing this.
Oh, hi, Catherine. No problem. Great that you can be with us. We're okay on time. We could open up for a question or two now. Otherwise, we could go straight into the demonstration. Holly, what do you think?
Yeah, I think if there's any questions, there's quite a bit of quite a bit of data here. I guess I did not completely follow the analogy with the Rizal networks, and I don't know if you can tell me a little bit more about that, and that would be helpful to me, and then also if there are other questions from other folks.
Oh, actually, that is a really good analogy to explore, although I wasn't actually intending to make the analogy directly. I was borrowing Louis' depiction because the image to me captures, and I'll go back to it, the image captures community credit in that it's a very bottom-up system that's emerging from communities around the world. It just so happens that he was depicting the extension of mycorrhizal fungi into our worlds. And I do love swimming in those metaphors. They're really, really, really rich. But that might be a longer topic. Maybe we could come back to that at the end if we have time.
Yeah, and so is there a direct, like a biological champion that shares, that they share credit between species or something? I don't know. Is there, I'm just wondering, I know the principles make sense, but I don't know if there's any champions that could demonstrate
There are many metaphors that are useful for talking about financial architecture. There's no direct analog to money, but I haven't even used the word money so far. I've only used the word credit. And what credit is about basically is interdependence. So the role that credit played in the evolution of our biological species was that it enabled us to become economically interdependent with a group of people anonymously, whereas before we were limited to direct interdependence with each other. So it allowed us to move into our empire building stage because it allowed our economic tribes to grow beyond Dunbar's number, which was 150. So if you look at our species compared to other species and the role that credit systems or money systems or exchange systems, the role that they played, what it did, which is universal to all species, is that it allowed us to move into really our youthful growth-oriented phase that all species go through. So it was an enabler of our empire-building phase. And that's analogous to what we can follow in other species. And what's really interesting about that analogy, if we do go to the forest, is that having played that role and having fulfilled its potential in biological terms, the current credit system fulfilled the potential of enabling us to become a global species. It did its job. And that's what our youthful empire building phase was about, was pushing the limits of our growth and exhausting that strategy. Well, we've now exhausted it. And so the analogy that I like for this phase is the one of the mother tree, where we have a bank credit system, which got us to where we are now, and that was its job. And now we know that it's maxed out. It's beyond its prime. It has maxed out its life force, and it's in an honorable process of decay. It would be honorable in the natural world anyway, and we can strive for that. And the analogy with the mother tree is that when a mother tree starts to decay and basically knows that it's on its way out, it invests much more heavily in the undergrowth. It invests through those mycorrhizal networks into what is popping up, the next generation of trees that are coming after it. And so that's the most inspiring role I can imagine for established finance, the most inspiring metaphor. Some people like to call it a virus. Some people like to call it a caterpillar, but I don't find those very particularly inspiring. The one that inspires me is the mother tree, which is the one that invests in the next generation of financial architecture as it grows, as it emerges through those mycorrhizal networks. Anyway, so as I said, that's a landscape that can take us very far for a very long time, but we can get lost in it. So
I appreciate it, though. I think that gave me a stronger picture of the biological metaphors that can be used, and also is hopeful for me. So thank you.
Sure.
There's a chat question, Jamie.
About the application. So this circle down here, that is a piece of a big grant proposal. And the larger proposal is called GIVEN, Grassroots Intercommunity Value Exchange Network. Actually, I had it pulled up earlier. Let's see if I still have it. There it is. So that's the application. And the list of partners are right there on the front. This is a huge document, it's 80 pages, so there's more to it than just what I described. All right, this is the homepage, the URL at the top, it's biomimicry.communityforge.net. What we've created here, this is our prototype that we're testing out, is a basic mutual credit facility, and it features both an accounting system, so we can keep track of exchanges, and also an internal market. And those are equally interesting. In fact, the meat of the real community is the internal market. So it's very simple. You can see here, you log in at the upper right, and I'm going to use Mother Earth because it'll look more like what yours will look like. My account looks like an admin account. Here's the welcome page. So when you first come in, you get news. And then up here at the top, you can click on members. You can see everybody who's involved. So you can see we've already gotten started with this. It looks like we've got 20 members. And this is another thing that makes this different from the bank credit system, is that it's entirely transparent. You can see everybody who has an account. There's no such thing as a secret bank account. Of course, the design elements are totally customizable. So if we wanted to have secret accounts, we could. We haven't gone that way yet. We're bringing back the elements of the tribal economy that we don't have in the modern bank credit system, which include this visibility and transparency and the direct relationships. But we're doing that in a modern context where we're also not losing the usefulness of our modern technologies. So we're still using the accounting systems that are the foundation of our whole financial system. But we're keeping it in the realm of real visible human relationships. So you can click on any member and you can see their balance. That's me, for example. If you click on my profile, you'll see my balance history here. When did I make an exchange? You can even see what the exchanges were. They're here. So the offers and wants, the internal market consists of offers and wants, and those are up here at the top. It's like an internal Craigslist. You can go through and post an offer of something that you have that you think could be of value to this community and that you would like to offer. And here you can do the same you can make requests for things that you need or want. When you make a request or an offer, either way, there we go. Okay. Sorry, this is actually what it will look like. It's very, very similar to what we saw before, but here on the right, you can see register offer and register want. So this is what yours will look like if you create an account. If you want to register an offer, you just go here, you say what you have, and then you'll have the opportunity, you'll have the option of broadcasting it, so you can send an email to everybody, or just hit save. And if you just hit save, nobody will get an email, but it will be posted on the internal website. So you always have that choice. And you can opt out of broadcasts if you don't want to receive any emails from anybody. So you've got control over that. Same goes for registering a want. If you want to make a payment, also very self-explanatory. So really a very, very simple system, pretty easy to use. In terms of the design element choices that we made as the biocredits working group, we wanted to choose a unit of value that would be the easiest for everybody to use, but is not referencing any national currency. So we figured the easiest one for everybody to use is probably hours, because we're already used to thinking in our heads about how to convert hours into value, hours into money. What is my hour worth? How much should I be paid per hour? What is the decent minimum wage, etc. So that's something we're already pretty comfortable with, and so we chose hours. So the unit of value is hours. Now the unit of value itself doesn't actually matter. It's a unit, but it's not value. It's like inches or centimeters. You can't say that inches or centimeters have any value in themselves. They're measuring something. So it doesn't actually matter which unit of value we choose. It only matters that we can use it. So that's why we chose hours. We also established an initial credit limit just for the prototyping phase of 13 hours. So everybody starts with a balance of 0. You can spend before you earn or earn before you spend, it doesn't matter. And whether you have a positive or negative balance in your account doesn't matter. So this is not like the way that we're used to thinking about money, where we tend to think that a negative balance is a bad thing. In this context, there's nothing better or worse, inherently better or worse, about a negative balance or a positive balance. One of them guarantees supply and the other one guarantees demand. So if you have a negative balance, all that means is that you have issued credit to somebody else for something that they provided to you, and you are promising to redeem that credit at some point in the future. Now, the fact that I've made that promise is the real value that's backing the currency. So that is a good thing. To have a negative balance means that you are supporting the economy. Now, to have a positive balance also means that you're supporting the economy, and there's no way to say that one is better or worse than the other. at the moment, the major requirement for this to function, so what you have to agree to in order to make this work, is you have to agree that you will give and receive in equal amounts within the network over time, over the course of your membership, however long that's going to be. And so concretely, that means that if you wanted to leave the system in the future, you would return your balance to 0 before you leave the system. And that's how we know that we will have a balanced give and take, a balanced exchange throughout the community. So that's the only requirement to make it function. And then, of course, it only really matters, the system only really makes a difference whatsoever if we use it. So level of participation is the other thing. So a minimum level of participation is required. So those are our requirements for membership. Right now, we're limiting it to 150 people for the prototyping phase, for the pilot phase, because we are trying to stay within the number of people that anthropologically speaking is manageable in terms, I think Tamsin calls it the magic trust number. So 150 is Dunbar's number, and that's the number of direct relationships you can maintain before trust starts to fall apart and the tribe breaks up into 2. So we're choosing Dunbar's number as a maximum membership for the initial phase, for the pilot phase. And it may be that we wouldn't need to go beyond that even in the future, so long as we have intertrading capacities with other communities, but we'll see how it develops. I mean, this is a learning experience. So the initial membership for the pilot is limited to 150 people, and right now it's open to members of the Biomimicry Network Leaders Community, anybody who's a B Pro or a B Spec, and any Biomimicry Institute staff. And then if you're in one of those groups and you would like to be part of the pilots, the way to join would be to go to the website, click on join where I am now, and it has instructions there. You just have to follow those instructions. That's the basics. Maybe I'll get a better sense of what else needs to be explained when we have some questions. So maybe I'll stop there. Sure. How about, all right, Mother Earth can make a payment. So we're going to pay Biomimicry South Africa for the use of their webinar system, which was very nice. Now, this is a system account, and we haven't yet decided to give a credit line to a system account. That would have to be a group decision. We haven't done that yet. That's a possibility for the future. For example, we could choose as a group, we could choose to give the Biomimicry Institute a credit line, and then they would be able to issue credit to us for things that we would do for the Institute. That's an example of one of the options we would have in the future. For now, we haven't made that decision. So we're gonna say biocredits webinar system provided by Biomimicry South Africa in work presentations and storytelling. We're going to send this to Justin on behalf of Biomimicry South Africa. I'm acknowledging this, and I'm going to give him a sum of 0. Now, here's what happens when I give him a sum of 0. He gets a hug. So the hug function, if you give somebody an acknowledgement of 0, what you're doing is he has to, it hasn't shown up here yet because he has to approve it on his end. But once he approves it on his end, he'll receive an email saying there's a transaction requiring your approval. Once he approves it, then it'll show up here the same way that I sent Jacques a hug because he offered love and compassion. So what this does is that it gives us a way of acknowledging, of making visible contributions that people have made, or contributions generally that have been made, or value that has been created, which we would like to make visible, that we would like to recognize. This gives us a way to do that, even if we're not sending credit. And that's just as important to creating our internal economy, basically building the economic body of our superorganism. That's just as important as the credit itself. It's really the information about who's done what for whom, what value has been acknowledged and recognized, what what are the needs and wants of the people in the group and who is able to supply them, getting to know what's available within the group. All of those things are qualitative. None of that has to do with numbers. So we can use this for a lot of qualitative expansion, even when there are no numbers involved. So that was a great example. Thank you for the question. Also, I don't know if anybody else on the biocredits working group wants to add to everything so far, or yeah, give a general, some of your thinking when you joined the working group, why you were motivated to do that. I mean, I'm only one of a team here that's really steering this collectively. I'm administering it, but the governance is coming from a broader group. So if any of you from the working group are interested, like Melina or Justin, or I don't know if Tamsin's on, maybe not, or Holly, if you have anything else to add, please feel free.
I just want to say, you know, I see that, you know, I've asked for graphic design support under wants, and I see that Richard can offer that. And so we haven't made a connection there, because I think one of the harder things for me was to think about what I wanted that was real and tangible in that moment. And then if the moment passes, that I forget to, you know, go back and look in the system. So I think it's a habit, right? You know, so it's like when I have a want, to go in there and put my want in there, and to look at the list of offers to see if somebody has it. So it's like a new habit I have to develop, so that I remember to come here, because I think the time has passed that I need the graphic support. But so I don't know. I gotta create like some kind of mechanism in my life so I remember to come here first. And so I'm just offering that as what was a little bit of a challenge for me. It's more my habit than the system that I need to adjust. So just sharing that.
Yeah, and I hear that. That's everybody's overwhelmed with all these platforms that we have to keep track of and pay attention to. So that's a legitimate concern. And one of the other elements of that proposal that's gone into the European Commission, one of the other things they're proposing to do is to create a public market. So to take these internal markets and somehow link them together into a transparent, an open market, where anybody within a community credit system that has joined the commons, that has decided to link up to this proposed intertrading commons, anybody in any community would be able to view the offers and wants of the other communities, and there would be a kind of single access point to all those offers and wants. And that at least would simplify it would be one Craigslist, basically, instead of a bunch of different Craigslist. So that speaks a little bit to that problem. But that is something we just have to learn, is how do we manage that?
Thanks, Jamie. And I think for me too, though, I'm really interested in training within our biomimicry network, because I want to get to know people here. I'm not really wanting to do the cross network, you know, trading at this point. I really want to do it amongst all of us and kind of develop our system first. That feels like I could develop more trust that way, as opposed to going to other networks. But I think for me, I'm going to just put something on my calendar to remind myself to go here more often, so that I can see how you all can help me do what I need to have done, and vice versa.
Yeah. I think the habits of thought and ways of doing things, that was the definition of institutions that was given to me by a professor once upon a time in the field of managing institutional change. Really, all of our institutions, the only thing they have in common is that they are habits of thought and ways of doing things. So this kind of goes into this create your own reality sort of paradigm. Change your habits of thought, and you do that collectively, and you've changed your institutions. Oh, see, Matthew has a question. If hours is the unit, how do you apply them to physical product exchange? For example, if I offer accommodation in South Africa or a return flight. Well, I did that. I offered accommodation. Let's see here. Travel and accommodation. We've got two. We've got one from Jane and one from myself. And this is how I did it. You're free to choose your pricing strategy. So this is a platform for experimentation in more ways than one. And you can also experiment with how you choose to, what kind of economic model you personally want. If you want a gift economy model where you're going to offer things for value and people don't have to pay you if they don't want to, they can just send you a hug, or they can choose the price. Or if you want to set a flexibility above a certain minimum in the price, or if you want to set a fixed price, you can come up with your own strategy. Or if you want people to make a bid, it doesn't matter. So what I did here, I'm a fan of pay what you will, so I said pay what you will. I'm offering accommodation in Basel. This is not an investment of my time per se, except for maybe some laundry. But then I thought, if I wanted to provide a suggestion or a benchmark to help people think about what they might want to offer, then I calculated in my head this was my own internal process, and everybody's going to have their own internal process. So I calculated in my head, what would a night in Basel cost at a hotel? And then I thought, how many hours of my time would I work in order to earn that same amount of money? And when I have those numbers in my head, then how much would I actually want to charge someone from this network? Or what would I want to offer someone from this network for that same amount of value, whatever I've just calculated in my head? And that's where I came up with a suggested 1.5 hours per night. But that's not a hard and fast rule. Everybody's going to come up with their own solutions. And one of the things about our system, that was another design element that we got to choose. In the culture of time banks, which is not what this is, but in the culture, even though we're using hours, in the culture of time banks, an hour is worth everybody's hour is worth the same, whether you're a lawyer or a janitor. In our system, we left it up to each individual to decide what to charge for their time, if they want to charge an hour for an hour, or if they think there's some reason why they would feel it more appropriate, or would feel better about charging something else for their hour. So if, say, I'm being asked to provide, to do some consulting, or to do some consulting that has a whole lot of background work behind it, and that in itself is enough to convince me that I need to be paid not just for the time that I'm actually spending on the consulting, but also for some of that background work, then I might justify charging 3 hours for 1 hour of my time. Or if someone comes in who can really charge a very high rate on the conventional market, and they just don't think it's worthwhile to participate in this market unless they charge an amount of credit that to them, psychologically at least, justifies their participation, then again, they're free to charge 5 hours for their hour if they want to. So but you don't have to. It's kind of those of us who like the spiritual principle that everybody's time is worth the same, whether you are a lawyer or a janitor, we might choose to stick with the hour for an hour simply because it feels right to us. But everybody defines that for themselves.
Jamie, I'm wondering if that description was really great, and I'm wondering if there's a place we can put that description here on the site so that, like when I'm pricing something, I'm like, what did Jamie say? I could take a look somewhere, so I don't know if there's a spot, under news or someplace that you could say suggestions on how to value your offers, or something like that. Here's some different ways you can look at it. It would be great if that was on here so that I could look at it later.
Well, there's just a couple of thoughts that I put in this welcome news article, which gives some suggestions in that spirit. Mm-hmm. It's maybe not as, I didn't use as many words as I just did now, but you're right. That's that kind of thing. This is something we can work on, is developing those, I guess, habits of thought and ways of doing things.
Yeah, it would be great to have that under a separate news article so that I can go back to it, when I'm looking for it. Sometime.
Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Can we add a place for people to share how they are calculating their prices in order to track logics and identify diversity and resilience, like an optional question in the posting? Yeah, I guess we probably could. And or at least we could have some standards. Like, for example, I'm aware that Biomimicry 3.8 has a consulting rate of $60 per hour for all their consultants, or at least that's what I was told. So that could be just an example of a precedent within our own community, within our networks, which we might want to post somewhere as a, help people think about it. But then also just for people to be able to articulate their own strategy, you could put that on your membership page, for example. Like if you go to my account, whatever your account, whoever you are, you've got your profile, and you would be able to add things on your profile. This system, by the way, was developed by Community Forge in Geneva. So this box that I'm looking at right down here is something they came up with. But we can customize all these, and we could have that kind of box on everybody's profile so that people can articulate their own pricing strategy, for example. That could be interesting. The reason we chose Community Forge, is because in some ways, the Community Forge system is a leader in this field. Not in terms of size. There's actually South Africa. You guys are the leaders in terms of the systems that are being provided for the largest number of communities around the world. And I had that list pulled up somewhere too. Yeah, there it is. If you can all see this list. CES out of South Africa provides systems for more than 800 communities worldwide. And Community Forge provides systems for about 140 communities that they are actively hosting. Now they've had about 8,000 downloads of their software because it's open source and you can just download it and take it and run with it, but they don't know what happens to those downloads once they're downloaded. But they are actively managing 140 communities themselves, and they're also actively hosting ours. So they're hosting the website. And Community Forge uses Drupal, just like CES from South Africa uses Drupal, but they've got a newer version of Drupal. CES is a little bit behind on the software, but they're upgrading. They're in the process of upgrading. And also, the big thing about Community Forge is that it is the largest system that is open source. And of course, we like open source because the natural world is open source. So it's very much, the Community Forge systems they emphasize the design elements of that system, emphasize adaptability, customizability, so that it's adaptable to the context of the community, so that you're really empowered to make as many choices as possible about your design elements. And it's very much oriented around the community-based culture, credit culture, as opposed to something like Suclos, which is a software that's being used by many communities in Germany and also in Switzerland. But the Suclos software is less focused on customizability and is more, the strength is more on security elements, because they're trying to appeal more to a business community rather than a community or a civil society community. So the security elements we have in Community Forge are enough for our purposes, but not as strict as Suclos, which would be more satisfying for a business probably. No, Community Forge is all volunteer. They work on a donations basis. I mean, it's gift economy. So if anybody feels inspired by what they've done, definitely, and what they're doing for us, and if you would like to express that in a donation, then of course that's one way you can do that. And so far we're following the same tradition. So this is being managed by Biomimicry Switzerland, namely by myself, and it's all voluntary at this point.
I was thinking, I think need kind of gets the community going. It's like, you have a need, and to go to the community with your need, kind of, because the offer is kind of, it's a stagnant thing in a way. You offer it, but unless somebody needs it, it's sitting out there, right? And so the thing to get more, to increase transactions would be to go to this network with your needs, and which is kind of, so you're going to get, and I'm using old thinking, right? I'm going to get in debt immediately before I even have any money, because if I come here first with a need, then I'm going to be in debt. And so it makes me hesitate. But again, this is old thinking, I know, based on what you shared already. But that's really what would encourage more transactions would be for people to come here with more needs. And then that would get the system running and get more credit. I mean, at least that's what I'm thinking. What do the rest of you think about that, what I've just shared?
I mean, your need is somebody else's market. So there's two sides to that coin. You're supporting the system either way with supply or demand, it doesn't matter.
Jamie, it's Catherine. Maybe to take that question even more broadly, you mentioned a few things that would be helpful at this point. What are your top 3 or 4 things that folks on this call could help with? Is it engagement in the platform? Is it different forms of expertise that might help the volunteer effort? What's on your list?
Really, it's participation. I mean, this is an experiment. And for our pilot phase, it's going to last about 6 to 12 months. And right now we've got about 20 members. So that's a pretty small market. We're limiting ourselves to 150 for this phase, but we're nowhere near that. So I would really love for people who are interested in participating to sign up, create new accounts, and use it. Start posting offers and wants. The more offers and wants we come up with, the more aware we become of our own internal abundance, and the more connected we are to what we already have. So really, it's new accounts and participation within our first circle of adopters. That's the next step.
Terrific. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Jamie, are you going to be presenting this at South by Southwest Eco?
Partly. This exact presentation probably wouldn't be appropriate for our audience, but because I think we're speaking to a business audience that's mostly interested in innovation in a business context. So I think it would have to be adapted to that audience. And I'm also speaking on behalf of the European Biomimicry Alliance, so I'd like to cover a little bit of just the whole proposal. This was one of 3 topics. So I'll certainly I'll talk about it. But I think I'll only have 10 minutes and I'll be covering other things. So that will still be a different presentation. Catherine could tell you more about that. She's our session leader.
That sounds perfect to me. Yeah, a slightly different audience, but definitely and so it'll be great to have it put into that context.
Yeah, I'm just interested in sending out another email to the network leaders and with an encouragement to join and to say, new members, and bring your needs and come here. So I'm encouraged to send something out. I would love to include maybe if you could attach the recording of this video to the Ning site discussion around the Exchange Network in there, in that group, that would be great, because then I could keep pointing there to it as opposed to it just being in the email. And I'd love to do that. And then I'm also thinking about, in particular, I'm thinking about Erin at the Institute. She's writing a lot of stories. And so I'm thinking from the Institute, she might make one of the great next member from the Institute. So I'm going to encourage a couple of the Institute staff members to join as well. So those are 2 things that I would like to do to support the network. And the third thing is more personal, and that's, me coming here more often with my active needs. So those are 3 things that I'd like to do to support this network.
Yeah, that would be great. I think it would be wonderful to have some of the staff members from Biomimicry Institute on the system, if only to see what it's about, so they can witness what's going on. If they're intimidated by the requirement for participation, we can talk about that, but it's actually, the requirement is not very much. So the requirement is that you come up with 3 ideas of things that you could offer to the network and 3 ideas of things that you could be interested to receive. So you post those, and that within the next 6 to 12 months, you make 1 transaction. That's the requirement.
Thanks so much, Jamie. This is wonderful.
Thank you, Holly, and Jessica and Matthew for the system, and the working group members for supporting and helping make these decisions, giving that legitimacy and process. Okay, I guess from my side, I'll say thanks to everybody who's on the call, last but not least, and thanks for your interest, and that's all, folks.
Thank you, Jamie.
Bye.
Bye.
There. Bye.